Hey, welcome back to J Lee TV and our modern leadership series. Today we're going to talk about a leadership topic that is becoming increasingly more important in our modern climate, and that's the idea of leadership integrity. We're going to discuss what integrity is, especially in the context of our modern world where things are very complex and things happen quickly. And we're going to talk about how this modern perspective of integrity can enhance your leadership and your ability to create trust and engagement with yourself and with your teams and whatever it is you're looking to do. So let's begin by defining leadership integrity. I look at it as two different ways: the traditional definition, as well as what I see as being the more modern and perhaps useful perspective of integrity. Traditionally, leadership is seen as a binary. If I do what I say I'm going to do, then I have integrity. And if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, then I lack integrity. And even within that, we can see that there is a value judgment to it. If I do what I say I'm going to do, I'm good. I'm a good leader. And if I don't do that, then I am a bad leader. And I believe when we look at this as too much of a binary, good and bad, it can create an environment within ourselves, but also within our teams that ultimately gets us not what we want. And this perspective, while it seems on the surface very useful, I find it to be overly simplistic and in some ways not actually useful in our modern context. It puts a lot of weight on being right or wrong, and ultimately this detracts and it takes away from our, let's say, leadership essence. In contrast, when we look at a modern perspective on integrity, is much more focused on stability, functionality, and usefulness. Instead of putting our focus on whether something is right or wrong, we can instead ask the question, does it hold water? Is it functional? The way I look at it is like a bridge or like a boat. A boat either has integrity, in which case it does not sink, or it doesn't. A bridge is either functional and you can use it safely walking across one side to the other, or it lacks integrity, in which case it may not be as safe or may not be as able to do what it is supposed to do, which if it's a bridge, it's to provide a crossing from one side to the other. And perhaps you can see and feel how this perspective removes the moral and ethical implications. Hey, welcome back to J Lee TV and our modern leadership series, and provides a more objective way of evaluating our actions and what it is that we're up to. This modern way of integrity gives leaders like yourself space and room to be adaptable, to be flexible, and to be present with whatever it is that's happening within yourself or your teams or your projects. And we can put our focus on what is effective rather than what is right or what is wrong. One of the biggest results of this modern perspective is it provides more space for transparency, for communication, and ultimately engagement, because people naturally have a resistance to the pressure that comes from being right or wrong. If the microscope is on our team members and the question is, are they good or are they bad? Is what they did good or bad? This puts the human aspect of our experience in such a way that is limiting, but it also puts pressure on us in a way that I don't believe is useful. There's the quote by C.S. Lewis: integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And on the surface, that sounds good, right? That sounds like a good orientation to have. But I'd ask you to give it a feel. How does it actually feel? For me, it gives me a sense of someone's looking over my shoulder. Ironically, for me, even though this quote is seemingly wanting to give people a sense of doing the right thing, there is also a feeling of someone looking over my shoulder, even if that's just my own moral judgment, my own Jeremy Cricket. And especially in our modern context where we have cancel culture and we have all these things like that, it can create an environment where suddenly instead of feeling spacious and feeling adaptable, I feel I have to do things a certain way or else it's going to be viewed a certain way. And as leaders, this can lead us to feeling anxiety, perhaps even shame, a bit of imposter syndrome when we are living up to this standard of doing things the right way. This modern approach also gives us the space to be transparent and honest with ourselves. Sometimes things aren't working. Sometimes the decisions that we made that we were very strong and we were very confident about, sometimes situations change. There's new information. Imagine you're a project manager who is tasked to produce a product, and it was said that it would be done in a certain amount of time, in a certain way. And yet, as the days go by, the weeks go by, the situation changes. But yet, there's still this deadline that if I have said that this project will be done by, let's say, the end of the month, but it's looking like because of circumstances, because things have changed or there's new information, it's looking like that's probably not going to happen. And if my sense of identity is wrapped up in this idea of if I don't do that, if I don't complete that project, then I lack integrity, in which case I'm bad, I'm a bad leader, then we can see how suddenly I may do certain things that will influence the actual quality and again, the integrity of this project. I may cut corners, I may dismiss certain aspects that are important, all for the sake of adhering to this idea that I did what I said I was going to do. Instead, if I'm looking more so about the functionality, the usefulness of the project and the decisions that are made around it, and the focus is much more on, is it going to work? Is there a quality that these decisions will lead to? Will the result actually be what we want versus just this idea of what something is supposed to be rather than what it is? Then we suddenly can misstep and the results of our efforts that can result in projects and results that aren't quite able to hold water. One of the most important aspects of modern leadership is being okay with the idea that things change. Circumstances change, resources change, things are always changing. And the traditional view of integrity as being good or bad essentially creates rigidness and creates an environment within ourselves and our teams that loses the adaptability of our humanity and our leadership. So a few ways to approach this modern perspective of integrity. The first is to give ourselves more space for honest reflection and inquiry. Sometimes we won't like the answers that come when we ask the hard questions. And yet I believe answers that are connected to reality will always have more value and utility than answers that are fixed on what we want to have happen or what we wish would happen. The second is our communication and our ability to be present with others as we are communicating. And ultimately, it's much more about the relationship than it is the result when it comes to being a modern leader. It's much too easy to focus on the result and have that be the end all be all. And yet, when we want engagement from our people, when we want them to really bring their passion, we want them to bring all of themselves into whatever it is that we're doing and whatever we're up to. We want to create environments where people feel like the relationship that we have with them is important and perhaps more important than just the result. Don't get me wrong, the result is important also. But if we step over or step on the relationship for the sake of the result, over time, this creates environments where we lose trust and over time we lose engagement. Having open communication is perhaps one of the most important things we can cultivate as modern leaders within ourselves and our teams. Third, this enhances trust. And perhaps trust is the currency of leadership in our modern era. When our team members feel like they are going to be judged as people, that they are right or they're wrong, it suddenly incentivizes them to perhaps not be as forthright, to not say as much of what is actually happening when they're speaking with us. And ultimately, this impacts our ability to make good decisions. If we have a team member that feels that because they said that they would be able to do something, and yet they are objectively unable to do that, either through a lack of resources, knowledge, or simply being the wrong person, suddenly they may choose to not be as honest, or to negate certain things, or to highlight certain ideas while dismissing other ideas. And as a leader, the information that you receive from your team is paramount. The information you receive is often all you have to go on. So creating an environment where your team members feel that there is no moral good or bad to whatever it is that's happening. Rather, the orientation is much more towards, is it working? Does it hold water? I find provides a much more conducive environment for people to speak into what is actually happening versus maybe what I want to have happen. And as we create this culture of communication, clear communication, and forthrightness, the quality of our decisions, the quality of our perception, our understanding of whatever it is that's happening in our projects becomes much more clear. And we can stay within the realm of reality rather than fantasy. So it comes down to being adaptable as a leader and creating teams, creating structures that provide that adaptability and flexibility. In our complex world where things change quickly and new information arises all the time, our ability to work with what is and to avoid the rigidity that comes from moral implications around our decisions, I find gives us a lot more space and a lot more ease. Ironically, when we remove the emotionality of things and we look at our decisions much more objectively, we invite more emotionality into our decisions and into our actions. And this results in having much more passion and much more spark within ourselves, but also within our teams. So hopefully this was useful, this modern perspective of integrity. If any of the topics or themes or ideas here resonate for you, or if you'd like to learn a little bit more, put a comment down, give this video a like, and let me know how this concept of integrity applies and impacts how you lead and how you be in the world.